we should go live on the channel. All right. You're live. It says we're live. It should be connecting.
Is it still public?
I see it there. It's a public link. I'll be able to see over here like any chats that are coming in and like real-time analytics. I have absolutely no clue. I posted on like our Facebook, but I have absolutely no clue how many people or if anyone's going to see that and show up. I know there's a few patrons that were like planning on popping in. Subscriptions.
I'm muted. I said it doesn't really matter. This is more for us to just chat and record it and update on.
So we're about a 20-second delay.
Oh, phenomenal. I'll record too.
And I've actually got a recording of everybody's coming through.
Oh,
cool.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you shoot me the link?
So you don't need us to record anymore? The audio?
No, you're actually like piped in through this. So
phenomenal.
I've done some
Nice.
tweaking and learning actually.
Did you get one of those like roadcasters or something? Or is it just you can do it through OBS?
OBS, I learned how to use a thing called Loopback. So I had to pay $100 for this software called Loopback, and Loopback will allow you to basically control down to the exact app and window or window of the service that you're using, Zoom, whatever, a Chrome tab, to be able to pull in exactly what it is that you want. So I can basically I've learned how to kind of tweak and do that. Just sent you the link.
I found it on FaceTube.
FaceTube. Okay, so
FaceTube.
all right. So I don't know who the viewers are, if it's us or someone else, but I'll chime in as soon as I have someone that comments.
No problem. I don't even. Oh, there's a live. Oh wow, that's wild. I think we're the only 3 people are watching, and we're 2 of them.
One is me.
Yeah.
and one is me. So.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. So anyhow,
So that's perfect.
Live TCE, hanging out. I guess the impetus was it's been a long time. How y'all doing?
Oh man, standing on the other side of the apocalypse, wondering when the good part happens. So I'm still waiting.
Hey man, vaccines are rolling out. It's coming.
Yeah, I got my vaccine, baby. I'm good.
Yeah.
Vaccine.
Yeah, first one or the second dose too?
Well, first dose.
Yeah.
Second dose I'm supposed to get around the first week of February, second week of February.
Nice.
So I got the Moderna one.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be in like 2024, 2025.
Yeah,
when you finally get yours.
we're looking at August, September.
I mean, it's not like we're not going to have to still wear masks and take precautions and all that other stuff anyway. So
yeah,
it's kind of like whatevs. I mean, it's not whatevs that we have a vaccine, but it's kind of like you'll get it. There's a window where like if everybody gets in the next year, I think that's going to be the timeline no matter who you are or what the deal is for it really matters. Especially if you've already had it. But anyway, so where do we start here, guys? Because
I don't know.
We left on a somber note.
We've got a few people that have hopped in, by the way. So, what's up? But I see some others in here.
Welcome.
Yeah, we left on a somber note. You know, we had a couple emails that were people either finding the podcast after it closed down, or saying like, I found this and I made my way through, and they were like, this was great, and I'm sad that it ended.
Me too.
I mean, I think the biggest thing still is y'all are busy with a PhD, and like that's got to be number one. But also, when I feel like our Jordan Belial episode was just like, oh, words, constructs. There's different ones out there that will describe in different ways. Use the one that's most useful. We've just described behavior analysis. Later.
Yep.
Oh, you mean we left people hanging because it was so complex, or what?
No, it was just, I feel like it was kind of like, hey, like this is, at the end of the day, it's just words.
Summed up the culture right now.
Words, constructs, and pragmatism, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is like, it's funny because I got a pretty cool invitation to join a discussion hosted by Peter Kleen. It was a small group of academics.
Cool.
And like graduate students. And it was literally like, I think 23 people in the Zoom meeting total. And it was kind of like an open forum. And he went over this paper that he wrote on anomalies and and how discovering anomalies is actually where the new discoveries are in our science, rather than focusing on just necessarily simply quantifying or simply expanding what currently exists. Kind of consistent with the idea of model dependent realism, and that like only that our models should adjust to the gaps that we see, almost like a God of the gaps argument for scientific progress, which I thought was fascinating. And what was interesting is that to see someone that sophisticated start asking people like us questions, and he's like, I don't understand why this is so hard. And he's asking people to like illuminate that for them. He's like, I don't see why there's such a gap between practitioners. It seems like it would really free people up to be a lot more creative and to really conceptualize things in a lot less of a stringent manner. Like, why are they so held back? And and it was just nice to see that kind of curiosity and that question baffling someone at his caliber and character and intellect, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. There's the paper is, I got to find the title for it again, but I mean, that thing literally had my head spinning. So he's a next level kind of character, but yeah,
What
and
book did he
that's
write?
where we left the podcast, man.
What were some of the books he wrote? I'm forgetting.
Peter Colleen.
Yeah.
He's more of a theoretician / basic researcher. But he's written on behavioral momentum theory.
That's right. Behavioral momentum.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Reciprocity. He's written on reinforcer effectiveness. He's done a lot of that kind of like basic and conceptual work, kind of like really teasing out the primary ideas of what we do and the basic assumptions that we make conceptually and philosophically. And he's really ripped a lot of them apart.
Cool.
I think he's a pretty brilliant guy.
We have Rebecca in the chat saying, Rebecca's saying, I created a YouTube channel just so I could say hi and let you know I'm here.
Oh, what's up, Becca?
Thank you.
It's awesome to hear from you.
You don't need to sell your data and your soul to Google. Hopefully that's why you created a different one.
That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. So we have two things that we have two major areas I want to touch on because we've all been going on behind the scenes. We're either going to talk about COVID briefly, and then but also obviously we need to talk about
state of the U.S.
the attempt to destroy democracy and rise of and I don't know how to put it, cartoon imperialist dictatorship of the douchebag, president in chief, because it's really gotten. I mean, like the thing is when you can't even make a joke because like reality's crazier than the joke. I mean, we've lost all sense of reason, direction, and moral framework. So where should we begin? Do you guys want to talk about COVID since that's a little more personal, and then we'll get into politics? Because I was thinking we could do a behavior analysis of insurrectionists. Do a non-linear contingency analysis of insurrectionists and try to identify particular contextual variables that might be controlling their behavior, and also talk about the particular motivations that drive them towards being complete and utter fucking idiots and storming the Capitol with draped in stupid capes, flags, whatever the fuck that was. I'm really so yeah, we can kind of decide.
Yeah,
I don't have any political. We don't have to, but
I don't have any COVID. I don't have any COVID things. I'm just like hanging out in my studio. I go outside to exercise and have a very small bubble and waiting until like media services type businesses are allowed to get this, which we are on the last of the list.
Do you how are you doing emotionally? Has it like are you getting out at all?
Yeah. Everything's good. It comes down to like a self-management repertoire, just making sure I'm getting up and hitting the gym in the morning, things like that is like the number one way to keep sane. There's plenty of activities, things to do, whether it's like getting outdoors, whether that's a jog, a walk, fishing, snowboarding, like.
Gosh, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, like it's not like I'm doing this every day, but I try to get out and do a couple outdoor activities like on the weekends, and then do something. Lifting weights, running. I don't know. Like it's enough. Keep insane.
You're so emotionally stable. It's unnerving. Like it makes me feel like I'm either just like a borderline emotional mess all the time, or like you're just a hard as stone.
I think last year when everything was like all my contracts were cutting and I was like, what am I going to do business wise? I think part of that just kind of numbed me to like, got the health. Family's all right. Like as long as those are there, I'm okay. We had a family friend that was in the hospital for 35 days. COVID.
35, you said?
COVID led to
Wow.
double pneumonia, led to heart attack, and
35 days in a heart attack.
pulled out somehow. Like, so, like daily updates and stress of just like how that stuff. You know, like I don't know, like when you put that in context, like that's kind of the family chats of like how is so and so doing today. I don't know. That's it, man. Like, there's a lot of little things like a nitpick that could be better, but
Yeah.
good enough. Good enough. You know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I mean,
I
it hits me,
had my
but it just
brush with
doesn't.
that, so. Go ahead.
It hits me, but it doesn't hit me super hard. And if it does, I just like let it kind of boil up, and then I pour out into a loved one, and then I'm good to go. Like,
Yeah.
My sister
point out
described that because I do that too. She's like, "You're like a self-cleaning oven." I'm like, thanks. Okay.
What does that even mean?
I guess you just like get it all out and then you're good. Like you just, yeah, just like what you said. You hold it. It like boils over and you let it out. You talk about it. You accept it, and then you're good to go.
yeah.
You clean again.
So I don't know. I mean, there's
it.
stuff there to be true. I just don't air it out too much, and if I
Yeah.
handle it, I handle it with people I need to handle it with, and I'm good to go.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
That's all.
You're very, very good at tactfully doing that. Yeah, I'm getting better at it. I think, getting COVID, I spent the first like big part of the lockdowns and stuff so afraid of getting COVID that it was causing me this crippling like anxiety and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I'm only saying this, only realizing this now in retrospect. And man, that really made me act in a very like paranoid, freaked out, constantly afraid to do anything situation where like I barely left my house for 8 months.
Yeah.
And now it's just all gotten so convenient because we can have our groceries delivered, we can have food delivered. I can literally like, if I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm out of whatever. I mean, with Instacart, I can have it from anywhere, not even just the grocery anymore. So like, I literally don't have to leave my house for anything anymore, which is like almost like self-imposed conditioned agoraphobia. But after I got COVID, it flipped. Like I actually like am less afraid to go out now, but maybe it's because having experienced the severity of it that I did get and all that other stuff, I think my perspective's just like, it's like that thing when you experience that total level of fear, you just kind of like shed the fear itself type situation. So yeah, I really hope that, and the sad thing about this, anyone who listens to us talk doesn't need to hear this shit because most of them are pretty sane people and they're gonna be like, yeah, we wear fucking masks. Are you crazy? Of course we wear masks. We wear blah, 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 blah. But I mean, like for real, living in Ohio and being in such a red state with so many people who have been so misinformed and conditioned to be untrusting of facts and yield their critical thinking to conspiracy theories and nonsense on the internet and strongmen, like it's been an incredible challenge to control my temper around them and my frustration with them, mostly again because having gotten it and spending 7 days in the hospital, and 4 of which I could barely breathe, knowing what that looks like and being afraid that you're not going to get out of there alive. It's a total shameful situation. And looking at the numbers and the statistics and the reality that basically we're at 390, almost 400K now. 1,000 people are dead. What, 16 million or 14 million?
Yeah.
We did pass 400K. Okay. What, 15 million people have gotten it? 14 million people have gotten it?
I think that's hit 25 million.
Are you serious? Am I just that?
Sure.
I just haven't looked at the numbers that much. Wow. 25 million people have gotten it so far?
I think the part of it is like, this is the difference between like 2 weeks of data right now. Like that's how bad it is. Like,
I mean,
I could be wrong.
It's astonishing to me. It's astonishing to me that that's not the thing people are pissed and writing about. Like, it's astonishing to me. It's so idiotic. I mean, there's no like, and you know, I think one thing on the podcast, we've been accused of this, and I've been accused of this, and I got accused of this by someone who I care about their opinion, so I tried to curb it a little bit, like the know-it-all be CBA. Okay. But this is one of those things that, like, I went through the emotions and made the phone calls to tell people I loved them because I wasn't sure it was going to not be that way. And I can say unequivocally that the disgrace that is this situation is unbelievable in America. And I don't know what the answer is. You know, it's funny because like I'm as a first generation child of an immigrant and who spent a significant portion of their childhood back in the motherland on an island with, I don't know, 3,000 people, whose elementary school was 3 rooms, and had kids dropping out of the 4th and 5th and 6th grade. I can say that like I've seen poverty, I've seen like pretty harsh conditions and no one giving a shit. But this and the idea that America was like this beautiful place where people had opportunity and all that stuff and this like American dream, and to live here and to not believe what I'm witnessing with my own 2 eyes in a way that's like reality shattering in terms of like what you aspire towards, what you believe is this place versus what it actually is. And the United Corporations of America have spoken, and it's ugly situation. It's gross. So I don't know. I really wish there was a general strike that had happened as a result of COVID where everyone just said, you know, we're not going to work. How's that? And they just would have, no essential workers, no nothing. They just would have shut the joint down and just walked off the jobs and said, fix this, take care of us. Or you don't get groceries, you don't get gas, you don't get anything. You don't get anything because deliveries, nothing, because this is an absolute disgrace. It's criminal, honestly. I think the people should go to jail over it. It's so bad because no one should have to experience unnecessarily the emotions that they're not going to see their child grow up, or they're not going to kiss their loved one again, or see their family and die alone in a hospital with strangers whose faces they can't see because of the level of precautions they have to take, and not experience the human touch that people need, crave to be, you know, secure in those final instances, you know, that last gasp, I guess. So COVID is one of those things that like I think is going to forever leave a lot of people changed. It definitely has changed me in a way that I did not anticipate.
Yeah. We got a few comments here. First of all, we got to preach it coming from Selena on your words. And then Rebecca passed along, what was it? So glad you made it through. Sorry that you had to go through that due to sheer ignorance. Yeah, it's definitely left its scar. I hope we learn and remember this stuff, but it seems that doesn't happen either as I start to look back on history. And
you know, and that's the thing. It's like, for me, I can say that it's funny because when like coming out of that, there was a certain level of clarity that you get. And I definitely walked out of that. So the bright side of getting COVID and having that horrible thing happen is like when you're confronted with the very real reality that that's it, you know, a lot of those deathbed confession things start becoming a lot more real and you visceral because you kind of start doing it yourself. You plead, you think about it, you pray, and I'm not a praying person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And not even just that though, like you also eventually come to that acceptance that you were talking about, Danielle, and there's something liberating about that moment of acceptance that if you can carry it with you, it's kind of like that guy, Mark Manson. He's an author, wrote a great book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. But it is that like actually sincerely, like you just don't care anymore. Like it's other people's baggage, other people's crap doesn't matter. All that matters is, you know, where you are in that exact moment, you know, what purpose you have, and like the judgment and the fear and all that stuff kind of sheds itself. And that is, I have to say, like a sincerely visceral, liberating experience that matters. That is, I will actually be grateful for coming out of COVID, because that is it's definitely an emotion that I had not experienced in my lifetime. And I'm glad to be so young to have experienced it, because now I get, you know, another 25, 30 years to try to come from that framework. Yeah. So that's pretty nice. But just looking at the state, at the reality and the fallout of it is unbelievable. I was having a conversation. Oh my God!
It's like so unbelievable, but it's also like
that don't believe.
Oh yeah, totally.
What's the most ridiculous thing that they've said to you?
So I have some family that's more on the right conservative side of things, and during the summer in particular, it was the whole spiel. If it's a hoax, masks are just set up as a way to remove your freedom. They were considering them a muzzle. They were referred to as muzzles. Don't forget your muzzle. Oh, you're wearing your muzzle today? And it spurred a lot of me trying to read and understand a lot of different perspectives and like try to like understand like America for what it is. And it wasn't just COVID. It was other social injustices and major events that happened, even past things too. Like I started reading about the Great Depression some, I started reading about getting off the gold standard, right? Like there's a lot of things that I've been digging into. And it seems pretty clear that the core like values, I guess, of an American are just set up to where they are in opposition of like evidence-based procedures that'll actually help us all.
Just thinking. Forget formal procedures. Just like clear, critical thinking.
No, sorry, I would agree with that. But like I guess what I was getting at there is like we can't on a collective level be pragmatic and move forward because of those values, and like they're really cool sometimes. Like it's
life, liberty,
good.
Happiness, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and like the individualistic thinking sometimes is like tempting and good for you and your small bubble, but it's like we need to find a way to correct this. And I don't think without a really central leader, like we're talking about like a national leader that values
like
those sort of things,
or
then we're not going to see that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've told Danielle this, but I've got my eyes on Canada as a backup plan if I need to. It would definitely be BC. Just going north.
I wish I could convince my wife to move to Canada so bad. My goodness, they're just so much more polite, and poutine is delicious.
Poutine.
The weather sucks though. I mean, worse than it sucks.
No,
in
it's
not
great.
so bad where I am.
It's great. Forget
But,
that.
Like, there's people, there's non-believers up here too. They're all over. I mean,
let's do a little contingency analysis of that. What are the conditions that lead a person to not believe their own two eyes? Like, honest to God.
well, but that's
seems to be
the thing though, because people up here, because we have sort of lower rates, they'll be like, well, do you know anybody that has had it? And then if someone says no, then that's their justification. They don't have the direct contingencies. They're not seeing it with their own eyes, and they don't believe the media.
That's literally a fallacy. It's the absence of evidence is evidence of absence. It's a logical fallacy. It's by definition a stupid thing to do that everyone's agreed on out of the gate.
I mean, there's a lot of...
It's just wrong to say.
I guess I've distilled it down to... there's some really important areas of the world, whether it's logical thinking and like what logic actually is, whether it's stuff that's just kind of like caught in these behavior traps, like mentalism versus behaviorism, I think, or if it's things like financial information. Like there's some pretty critical things that just aren't getting to us early enough. Like I've been diving heavy into financial stuff the last month, and there's things that I'm learning that I was like, I wish I had known this 10 years ago.
Are you kidding me? Me too.
I'd be in a better spot,
For sure.
So there's like multiple subject matter areas that we need to instill at a much younger age. I feel like if there's any chance of this, and
I think one thing that this has really illuminated, which you actually are kind of hinting at, is the significance of complexity. I think as behavior analysts I've been conditioned to, and also scientists, honestly, this is scientifically minded too. Occam's razor is a thing. Like you're supposed to slice and dice until the simplest possible explanation. But what I'm finding out as I dive deeper and deeper into being able to understand how to do an analysis of groups, because that's, in societies and cultures, and what does it really mean to talk about multi-level molar behavior analysis versus, micro behavior analysis and or just like individual analysis of contingencies. And it's, the degree of variables that are necessary to even like begin to have a causal framework to springboard from is so vast. You have to be almost an expert at everything. One of the reasons we quit the podcast, and I don't know actually if we really talked about this. So this will be interesting for everyone to talk about. Maybe get your guys.
I don't know where you're going. Let's see.
When the pandemic started, right? Like, I was super frustrated and sad by all the shit that was going on. Like, it was causing me like legit depression. Like, just thinking about all the fucking horrifying race relations stuff and George Floyd's situation and all the horrifying police brutality things that were going on. Not to mention just like the starvation and the death. Like, it was literally dragging me down. And seeing the level of polarity between people whose interests should be aligned.
Oh yeah.
And being totally confused as to why over something so ridiculously arbitrary as color, you know what I mean, being the thing that's keeping them separated. And it's like, man, like there's so other, if everybody would just reject that as a problem and really look at the real shared collective issue, which in my opinion is class, it's money, it's constrained by people's material means, which we'll get to that, you know what I mean, we'd actually start making progress on this shit. But instead it's just like this horrible reality that is just really depressing. Anyway, so I was like trying to understand that from a behavioral perspective and trying to like pull on that thread. And I'm like, how the fuck do you even begin? So I was like, okay, we got to start venturing outside of certain things. Started reading some sociology stuff because they use geometric models of social networks and of just societal networks to look at complex relations on the quantitative side. Obviously, sociology in terms of the quantitative or just like theoretical isn't very solid, but the measurement from the stat side is pretty amazing. The real stat guy people who do that are unbelievable actually. And so that was interesting, but that was unsatisfying because there was not enough context, because we're also saying, okay, like this is just like correlational relations between big groups. That's not good enough. I need to understand, where does the rule governance come from? So like, how does the language, how do the mores, how do those particular shared ideas and beliefs, where does religion come from? And when I say religion, I mean ideological entrenchment. I don't necessarily mean just whatever religion, but yeah, like the notion of ideological entrenchment. And I'm like, okay, so like let's tug on that thread. And I started reading some social psychology stuff. I got into Jonathan Haidt and The Righteous Mind, and I started reading some a couple different people actually. Anyway, and that was pretty interesting. But even then, the science part, the explanatory framework of it seemed satisfying, but then the empirical work was not, honestly. There was no, it was like your standard type of demographic, BS, not BS. It's not fair because it's good science, and Jonathan Haidt is an amazing.
It's just not like a complete view.
It's not quantifiable and measurable and useful in terms of like I could write a program or an algorithm in order to plug this out and really count something, right?
Yeah.
So a little
more descriptive over like.
Yeah, I would say that it's qualitative and descriptive, paired with statistical correlational measures, but not like anything that you could really argue they have a causal framework that they can springboard from to demonstrate that this is the thing that makes the thing happen, right? So we go from sociology, we go to social psychology. Then I started looking at foraging and forage theory, and that leads you into some anthropological stuff. And they have pretty cool statistical models, which leads to like the quantitative analysis of movement. So be like tracking herd patterns and that kind of shit. Like really cool ideas, and the measures are amazing. The people who can do that math are on a caliber of smart that are way beyond what I could possibly even begin to handle. Like trying to even go there, and that's a guy there's a really amazing does that for anybody who's interested, named Turchin from the University of Connecticut. I've spoken about him before in the past. He's fascinating. He has a book called The Quantitative Analysis of Behavior, which is of movement. And it's more like those types of like, so then we got anthropology, we got quantitative analysis of movement, and then it's like, well, okay, let's keep going down this rabbit hole because that doesn't explain it. Because then it's like, okay, well then what are the actual motivations for doing this stuff? We've talked about rule governance, we're talking about culture, we're talking about just like communitarian communal relations. None of your satisfying frameworks. What's the next thing? Well, maybe it's just about motivations. Let's look at economics because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about motivation, right? Money, not just money, but the various types of ancillary reinforcers that are paired with money that you get from a social perspective. And this goes back to when I was talking to Jordan Belial, and I wasn't ready to articulate this clearly at the time. And I said, have you looked at the thing that you were looking at through social relations or social networks? And he said, where do you see the connection? And in my head, I was like, where do you not see the connection, dude? Yeah. But I was like, not ready to have that discussion at that point. But the idea that people influence other people, period, because we are biologically evolved to be social animals and community oriented in such a way that we are in an interdependent like existence. Human beings don't achieve what they achieve if at some point in time they decide to engage in cooperation and reciprocal social relations that permitted them to hunt the mammoths and the saber-toothed tigers and all that shit back in the day. Mm-hmm. To create communities, to create cities, to create etc. So like those things are part of who we are. So you have to have that type of evolutionary cultural idea. So it's like, okay, let's look at economics and what is a behavioral theory of economics? You get into behavioral economics, you start looking at discounting and choice theory and decision-making theory. And that was super cool, super fascinating. The math is awesome. But even that, when you start looking at it, at like where the actual science, the state of the science is, mm-hmm. real early. And like, I didn't realize how early it is. Like if you look at delayed discounting is still in that basic translational phase. Applied work is at best correlational with anything that has to do with discounting, at best. And that's saying that like, okay, we took this measure, we did an act intervention. Oh, look at the outcome and change in discounting that we got. Like, and that's just for time discounting. And for anyone wondering, time discounting is the degree at which a person values their future self versus their today self. So, okay, so I'll take $75 for myself now versus $100 in the future, right? Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So then once I started looking into that, there's different kinds of discounting. And my fascination came down to social discounting because, I mean, and this circles back to the conversation we're having with Camille and, you know, where she's interested in ethics. And even actually when we're talking what's his name? David, about ethics and the significance of it, because he's a behavioral economics guy, in my opinion, discounting and all that stuff. And thinking about like, what is the ultimate question that we're looking to answer here? Like instead of trying to figure out what the hell's going on and tugging down this road, because, and I don't know, Danielle, if you dealt with this, but like, I almost drove myself freaking crazy. Because it's like you start reading something and then you start reading the footnotes and you start reading the references. And then once you start reading the references, you start reading the footnotes in the references and you start looking at the references in the references. You go down such a deep rabbit hole of infinity that you literally get so disoriented. I can see why there's academics out there that seem insane, because I'm not going to lie to you. I lost my mind for like a good 2 to 3 months, like full tilt. I think I had lost a grip with reality in trying to solve a problem that is impossible in and of itself to solve without having a real pragmatic conversation over what matters and being able to detach from just measurement and the pure empirical point of view and getting to the point where we can talk about values, we can talk about moral theory, and we can talk about what is right and wrong and how you move from there. And that being the basis for decision making. And the other stuff is more like how rather than why. And being able to see that transition, at least conceptually in my head, to understanding that there is a distinction between what the purpose of science is, which is primarily, especially basic science, how, and it being a lot of work to be able to derive the why from that. And that's kind of where we are today and kind of where we're standing. I'm start thinking, so going back to the question, why or how ought we live, which was an original question that we asked, and then taking that question and applying it to the current situation and saying, okay, when we look at a complete lack of response to a global pandemic that has devastated the global economy, has left millions of people without their loved ones, because human beings are 6 degrees of separation, so the number of people you impact, paired with the tertiary or secondary outcomes of that, school closure, loss of job, food insecurity, financial insecurity, housing insecurity, like all that stuff, socioeconomics, period. And then you add the political powder keg of algorithmically conditioned responding extremism, which is what it is, right? It's algorithmically conditioned extremist responses, conditioning. And then you just have a perfect powder keg that doesn't fit into any of those boxes. And it's like, there's no simple answer. So then like I started detaching from social media a little bit, because mostly like meme culture is fun. Being a troll is fun, but like the quips don't solve problems, and the quips oversimplify. Like slogans are cool, but they oversimplify these problems to such a way that it gives idiots a talking point that they can't actually explain why they think what they think. And it gives like people who would otherwise be reasonable a way to virtue signal and sound like they actually like care about something without actually having to engage the material critically themselves as well. So it's a double cop out, resulting in this situation that we're in. So it's like, what's the answer to this stuff? And I think the answer is all these different disciplines coming to a point where they coalesce in such a way where we can have a serious conversation about what matters and how do we start really analyzing this stuff. And if we were to apply a science of behavior analysis to the general behavioral repertoires that we're seeing, what the hell would that look like? Well, let's do that for a second, shall we?
We have a quick comment I want to fill you in on. It says,
Please.
so true. It's so true. There's so much to know from so many areas, Rebecca says. It's like pulling yourself to the macro picture, looking for the micro solutions at the same time.
It's exactly that. It's crazy. And that's the thing, is that like we're not designed to be telescopes, man. I mean, one thing that I found very interesting, I really recommend anyone who wants like a really nice crash course on socioeconomic, anthropological, and like a bioevolutionary perspective should read Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens. Highly recommend that book. It provides a wonderful breakdown of societies, the evolution of societies, and also does an excellent kind of like behavioral economic explanation at the end too, which is kind of nice. He's an author by trade and philosopher. He has some biology and economic background, but he's mostly a historian. And I highly recommend that book. But that's the problem, man, is that when you try to solve, when you hyper target, you miss the mark. When you go for the major root, it becomes too conceptual. And then what the hell are you really solving then? Mm-hmm. So it's like, what is the solution to this, and what leads people to think? And I think that's what it is. It's overwhelming, man. So like you latch onto the one problem that you identify with, and that becomes, the big boner that you have with the world and society, and everything else be damned. And that creates these competing contingencies and points of view that become borderline irreconcilable at a certain point. So how do we reconcile that? And how do we possibly break that behavior down? So let's pick a behavioral repertoire and break it down. All right, let's look at the idea of a denier. Oh, no, denier is too easy. Let's look at the insurrectionists, and that's what they were. We're not going to call them anything else on the TC. Sorry. I'm not a journalist. I don't have to have a balanced point of view. Mm-hmm. Those people attempted to overthrow the government, and new videos are even worse. Like, have you guys seen some of the new videos, PS? Just a small sidebar?
No.
Oh my God.
Of the stuff that happened there, or like content that's being...
Yeah, like they were just released yesterday. Stuff, where they're like, we should just install a new government while we're here.
Yeah.
Like real business cash.
Yeah.
Like they were like, yeah, all right, that's what
I've seen some stuff scrolling TikTok and
stuff. Are you crazy? Talking to the Capitol guys, like, hey, the president told us to come here. I don't understand why this is confusing. You guys are supposed to be on our side. Right. And like they're literally saying it like that in this, like they're totally dumbfounded that someone whose job it is to keep them the fuck out is telling them no. How is this not brain-breaking stuff for everybody? I mean, this like both makes me sad and angry, but both doesn't surprise me at the same time. It's like,
not at all.
The most frustrating emotional state I could ever describe.
Yeah. Dimitri and I, for context, I don't know, at one point, I don't know if you called me or I called you, but it was like on the phone, speakerphone, watching Twitter, and like, what the is going on? Like, what is going on? We were on the phone
for like an hour and a half, dude, what the hell's going on?
I paused. It was like 11:30 or 12 my time, and I didn't get back to like clicking out and like doing something else until like 4. It was like 4 straight hours.
We were equally as engaged up here. We were like, what is happening down there?
I know.
It wasn't surprising when you talk to certain people. It was I said it wasn't surprising. It wasn't surprising outside of like so few people could push in and actually disrupt the government. That was the part that was like, dude, I grew up next to Area 51 and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
there's pressure sensors on things. Like you don't even go next to it because they're gonna be there with a Black Hawk like that. And like those folks, granted, there's a lot of them. Like, how do you push into the Capitol? Like that was the part that was extremely surprising to me. Is like, how did we make this so easy?
I mean, come on. That's the one time where I think race is not an undersimplification of the problem.
Yeah.
Replace Giuliani and Trump and the other clown car members giving all those speeches before it happened with a black person or just a regular average Joe.
Oh yeah, no, and you would have saw
and give them the exact same words to say. Forget like don't make it
control
more inflammatory or less
variable.
Inflammatory, but like control. The only variable is you replace an average person or a person of color in their position, and those people would be in Guantanamo Bay right now. They wouldn't even be in federal prison.
Yeah.
They would have had a black mask over their head, sack over their head, pulled into a car, and disappeared.
Yep.
That's how serious, in my opinion, this thing is. So, like, the hypocrisy, I mean, obviously everybody knew that everybody's a hypocrite and a horrible person, but I mean, like, this exposed it in a way that it's just like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was that. But how do you get to that point? So let's put the hat on and try to divorce ourselves of the emotional response that gets created out of a group of people attempting to overthrow a fair and democratically elected process that has stood the test of time as really arguably the oldest democracy in the world, at least modern democracy in the world, that spawned multiple social revolutions and really changed the face of civilization as we know it, to the degree of, like, I don't know, the Roman Empire or the Ottomans could only match that, you know what I mean? Like that level historical influence. And you're like, okay, so why are these people like this? Well, I mean, is it material conditions? Because, there is a lot of evidence that shows that a lot of those people actually had money. So, but some of them don't. So then is it like a cultural thing? Is it a programming thing? All right, so let's look at motivators. What are some of the motivators that you guys think would see? Because I would argue that material conditions is one. And by material conditions, I mean relative value and social value relative to other people in society too. It just seems like this idea of white grievance is a serious reinforcer that you don't anticipate actually exerting control over people to the level that it is in today's society. And again, this I think comes from my obliviousness to this stuff, as it being a shocker. That's one thing. Then you have the idea of the culture war that's being fed across the board, and this like intensive dichotomization of every issue that you can imagine, where it's black or white, you're either on a 0 or a 1 on anything and everything. And there's honestly this devaluation of truth and of shared reality.
Mm-hmm.
And those three variables, which need further breaking down, I think are the primary underlying contributing things that have made this possible. Above and beyond all is the degradation of truth. Like all that other stuff is always going to be bubbling on the surface, and just generally you're always going to have certain level of division across people because human beings are generally conflict oriented in terms of like power struggle is natural, I think, in terms of someone's going to want to get one over on somebody no matter what perfect utopian world we can build.
So you had conflict, devaluing of truth. What was the other one?
White grievance. It's the pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. Like a lot of like if you look at like rural or poor whites in America today, I think they've, as a result of globalization, automation, the destruction of industrial jobs and menial work, and the outsourcing of those things. I mean, you're starting to see, they're starting to get a little bit of a taste of what it's like for people of other minority groups.
Yeah.
And also the way demographics shift over time, they are facing down the pipe of becoming a minority in a country that they think is theirs.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Just naturally and demographically speaking. So, I mean, that creates a certain sense of loss that they think that they can control because they don't think they control the other stuff. Mostly because they've been conditioned to operate under economic assumptions that conflict with the reasonable and necessary solutions that would curb the need for all this stuff. So then all the stuff coalesces back to a basic analysis. What are the areas of deprivation that people are under, in which case sets the evocative operations that would lead them to engage in particular behaviors. And so Trump is an SD, he's not an MO.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So SDs aren't causal, right? They simply signify reinforcements available.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the underlying MO? It's that material condition. And that is a conversation that is not happening enough, in my opinion, in mainstream media. It's not happening enough in our regular everyday discourse. And it's not happening in a productive way where it's going to reach the right ears.
Yeah, no, it's one of those fundamental errors of the behavior analysis tries to correct for, of pointing to a single person or blaming a single person, or like pointing to the organism, right? Rather than stepping back and looking at the factors that are leading to it.
Yeah. So I think we need to get to the point where we're talking more about economics in terms of like reinforcers and access to primary reinforcers and being able to solve those things. And I'm really worried that it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and this is, I mean, if Becca's still listening, she knows this because we listen
She
probably
is.
to very similar people. But I mean, like, seriously, if they don't do some FDR level shit, I mean, some like society altering level stuff, I mean, just from an empirical perspective, the data is there. We are Germany 1933. Okay.
I would think that's where we're at too, from what I've learned.
So like they need to straight up, like, we need to have another quote unquote saving of capitalism, as FDR was quoted saying, "I saved capitalism with socialism."
Mm-hmm.
We need to have another one of those societally shifting moments. And I'm not talking about full tilt redistribution to the trolls who would say, like, you know, you sound like a communist, because I'm just so tired of that trope too. It's so exhausting. Just such an ignorant statement. It's just like, if you haven't read anything to not know how stupid you sound and how like that's a lame ass Ben Shapiro gotcha and you need to fucking clean your face up, like you're outside of the people I'm talking to. You become an unreasonable person, and I have no patience for it. But
yeah, Rebecca,
I mean, those are the things that need to happen.
Rebecca said, I think the core issue is people not understanding how the brain works and how to appropriately make sense of thoughts and emotions in response to sensory input. And I added in, yes, basic needs met for everyone. 2 subs is here. Asked, what's the emergency?
2 subs?
Dude, 2 subs.
2 subs, when will you unmask yourself? You're harder to unmask than like an anonymous spy. Like, we got Mike Flynn, but we didn't get you. I want to know who you are so bad.
Oh, 2 subs. Yeah. For those that are listening, 2 subs has been a long commenter, and yeah, don't know.
Really mysterious character lurking in the background.
And knows their shit.
I want to know who you are.
Knows their shit and has been watching for years. The stuff that I put out. Like, knows me better than me probably at this point now. Yeah, I can't articulate it in the way that you do, Dimitri, but I call you and one other person pretty regularly after I've read something that's outside of the behavioral perspective, and I'm just like, hey, I'm reading this stuff. It has to, be an economics perspective or something like that. Like, help me sort through this, and does this make sense? That I've led to really similar positions that you're describing there, where
I mean, dude, it's just
it's
such
the economic
common
conditions
sense. Economic conditions, man.
Yeah, they're driving a lot, and there's other things that are on top of that, but that's the one that I think that's kind of the seed for a lot of this.
Well, I mean, if you look at the problems and you're like, okay, let's just say in a perfect world I can solve X. Let's look at and this is where I think like it's a fair criticism to look at both sides of the aisle and say, okay, there's an error going there's a particular type 2 error, I think, that's going on, where it's this like Wokistani thing where it's like identity politics the max, and like, everything is identitarian in some capacity, which again, that is a fact. It's always bubbling under the surface, and I think we've seen that highlighted in ways that if you don't agree with that, you're blind, like you're literally refusing to acknowledge it because it's so obvious. But then on the other hand, it's oversimplifying the necessary need for some semblance of matching why someone, or seeing why someone's engaging in those other behaviors, and then understanding that it's an economic issue, which is what everyone's harping about on the other side. The thing is, the other side has a broken, and in my opinion, morally bankrupt economic perspective, and it is morally bankrupt. Because it doesn't take into consideration the reality that when you start a game 6 miles back again, it's impossible to ever really catch up. Even if you make up 80% of the ground, you're still behind.
Yeah.
Relative to the other person in a way that's insane. So then the question should shift to, how do we solve these problems? No, the question should really be, what do you want? What is the, how ought one to live? How do we want to structure our society? How should it look? What do we want to see? Because I think the other thing that's missing here, and this is a thing that I've fallen into deeply in the last, I don't know, since I was probably 13 years old. I remember being in 8th grade when I first came back from Greece, and I was asked, what I think about certain things, and I was like, well, I'm more of a cynic. So I've been a cynic for a long time, and I'm starting to realize that the cynicism is just a fun, easy cop out. It's not, you don't really mean anything. You don't really believe in anything. You don't really stand for anything. You're not affirming any principles that matter to you. And that's a cop out. It's easy to be a critic. It's hard to be somebody who stands for a thing. And so what do you stand for? And then that's a question that we have to ask within our society. Arguably, if all these people who are quote unquote constitutionalists, all these people who want to see reform, so multiple sides of the aisle, what are the underlying things that people agree on? They agree on the notion of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but they don't agree on the definitions of those things. Okay, so let's start getting into defining those things, and what should that stuff mean? Well, I mean, from a behavioral perspective, I think the easiest proposal is, where do we always start any intervention? Baseline, right? We measure, we see. Well, let's look at the baseline. The baseline, when you look at the way people are functioning in their lives, there's such a massive level of disparity.
Yeah.
Okay, that you have a huge segment of the population that's being seriously deprived in a million different ways, from a different area, and another segment of the population that's those rats that eat to the point where they're about to kill themselves.
Yeah.
And gave themselves diabetes because they had access to pellets unlimited without having to do anything for it.
Makes me wonder if a change on something like rotations for congressmen and congresswomen, congresspeople, whatever they call it now, was mandatory before going into office. You had to go to experience different parts of society so that you knew why you were there.
I'm so with you. Term limits, you mean?
So not just term limits, but before you get into something, you have to go through and experience different parts of society. So you have to go to, and
that's that's too much for me. But I hear what you're saying,
dude. It's that's why I got so fascinated in perspective taking, was when you get into similar circumstances and you can start to alter your relations of your life and see them a little bit through somebody else's eyes, then you start to be I was missing this.
Well, if you haven't lived it, you don't know. You don't know the contingencies. You can
guess
and talk about them all you want, but you don't know.
Well, that's where.
So I hear you, but then I would ask the just a simple pragmatic question: how do you even make that? How do you do that? How do you enforce that? How do you do that?
I don't know if you can enforce it, but
stripping choice away from people.
I don't know if you can enforce it, but maybe that's something you could do as a grassroots movement of Congress, lawmakers, whoever it is, at whatever point in city, local, state, federal government. What you do is you start a grassroots movement of, those are the values and the experiences of the people that you're going to uplift. So I don't know if you can truly overthrow any system, whether it's a certification system, whether it's a local
systems
group,
violence is the only way to change it.
Yeah, that's it. So if you want to do it in a way that's not full tilt violence, then you got to kind of be smarter and play the long game on things. I feel so.
I'm with you. So then the question is, whose responsibility is that, and how do they do that? And I think we get to that part.
It's hard in an individualistic society, but that's where if you have enough people, it doesn't have to be a significant, crazy amount. Like I was learning about the ACLU that started with 40 people, right? The accomplishments that's happened as a result of 40 people. There's a lot more to go, but it's pretty insane what you can do with just like some organized, systematic processes.
Chipping away at a problem.
Yeah, and I don't know the alternative. Like I don't think there's an alternative outside of that. So, who is it? It's people that share these values and have the skill sets to be able to do it, and that start putting in the work. Like,
well, it's also a commitment to be public and speak the truth, not your truth, even just the truth.
Yeah,
and being committed to that. I mean, that was going to be part of the point that I was looking to make, is that, I mean, it's become very difficult to speak the truth, and because you're either labeled you're labeled a liberal, or you're labeled a socialist or a communist, or you're labeled, on the other hand, or you're labeled a fascist or a Nazi. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And part of that is people need to start having these conversations of facts and letting the facts start to speak for themselves, but having the audacity to speak the truth in relation to those facts, and also have the audacity to stand by what they think and what they believe in relation to those things as well. And I really think that social media, for all the good that social media has done in terms of opening up and democratizing like information and movements, it's also created the conditions of echo chambers and bubbles in such a way that, and also of low effort activism, where people can armchair tout themselves in terms of being involved in something rather than actually doing committed action. Because to your example with the ACLU people, and that's I'm assuming you watched the Ira Glasser Rogan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's an amazing person, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
highly recommend that if you're interested in free speech. He's a former director of the ACLU, and he did a 2-hour talk on the history of free speech case law that the ACLU has contributed in creating, and he gave his perspective on all the Twitter bans and all that stuff. And his opinion was surprising, but very well thought out and articulated and argued, and for the right reasons, in my opinion. So I don't 100% agree with his point of view, honestly, because I'm typically a free speech absolutist, like he is, but I do think that certain things rise to the level of yelling fire in a crowded theater, and I think telling people to march in the Capitol is that. So fuck him. But not Ira, but the other guy. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But we have to be able to speak the truth, man. Like, that has to be a thing that people can have, and we have to start pushing those, not narratives, because again, narrative has with it, it's a baggage word. Mm-hmm. Narrative is like your opinion, man. You know, at least that's how people interpret that word. Mm-hmm. It needs to be like, this is the facts of the case, and now the question is, how do we interpret these facts? And that's the disparity, is when you see a different reality than another person because you are operating on different levels of assumptions, by definition, you are creating the conditions of total conflict. And
what's fascinating to me is that this is happening within even scientific societies like our own, if I can call it that, where those issues are happening and both sides don't see it. And it's like, this is pretty blatant. It's pretty clear to understand like where things are breaking down here. And also knowing that we're largely just not teaching that whatsoever to the people that are coming into our field too.
It's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah, and it's just like systemic solutions take a while to actually provide like change, and we haven't even started in many ways, and we're expecting change right now.
In no way have we.
Yeah.
In no way have we started change on a societal level, on an interdisciplinary level, like in none of those areas.
And I guess my first step that I've always, I think I was taught this in grad school, was like, if you don't understand, just like consume as much as you possibly can until you think you have enough of an understanding to where you can hang with people that are trying to change it and like understand why they're doing what they're doing. Get it going again, so assume it is. I'm trying to reconnect. Let's see. My webcam will take a second. Hold on. Let's see if we're going again. I think we're going. Yeah, we're going again. Okay, so I don't know if anybody's still there. Danielle, thank you so much for saying reconnecting. Sweet. I was about to shout out. I thought it was Daniel. I didn't have my glasses on. And I was like, we need to shout out Daniel.
I've been
whoever
called
that is.
everything. Daniel, Daniela,
Two
Danielle.
subs. What's the emergency? This
Yeah.
fucking guy. Who is this person?
Still here. We're back. Okay. I don't know. I'm going to get my camera going in just a second. But yeah, I don't know if the NSA was listening.
Is it
They were
going
looking
yet?
at things. But yeah, we're live. People can hear us.
Oh my gosh.
I'll get it going, Rebecca. Thank you.
Oh man, that's hilarious. 2 subs. What's the emergency? This guy. Who
Yeah.
is this person? Who are you?
That was a while ago, right when they jumped in.
Oh man, I missed that.
What were you saying? So
I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm just kind of talking and rambling about nothing.
it's not
It's just
nothing.
been-
It's- I guess
honestly,
what I
it's
was
just-
trying to get at was what I've been just trying to figure out the totality of the issue, I guess is what I've been. Like, what
I mean,
are
that's
all
the-
the different factors? Like you were talking about probably an hour ago.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
at
you
that
can't
point-
though. So like, you have to pick economics. So like, what would be an economic solution that you
No,
think
but
would have the
I guess I
maximum
want to
impact?
know enough of the different fields, other fields, and like perspectives on how they're trying to solve it first. I guess is my first step, and that's taken. I kind of like in hindsight, I kind of got interested in this stuff in like grad school, but I've
Dude, what's up?
it's like the government
Muted.
doesn't want us to have this conversation. It's like the government doesn't want us to have this conversation.
Dude, honestly, they don't. I'm telling you, this is CIA is like, nope, you can't do this. Becca, are we live again?
Not yet, but or maybe we are. I don't know.
I don't know anymore.
I think we are.
I've
Yep.
never-
Oh yeah, we're live. Okay.
Oh, is that you?
This
What?
this is not a CPU issue. This is not like I'm at 30% of my CPU. I've streamed. Should be buffering. Dude.
Do we reschedule and come back to it?
We could.
That was about to be a good conversation because the totality is the whole point of this thing. Is that we got to give up on that idea.
Well, hold on. If we can finish this, then I can at least